Welcome to the podcast, Brave Enough, Renew, Recreate, Recover You. This is Julianne Williams, and again, I appreciate you joining me today. I have a really special person today that I know will give you some really, some just very enlightening information about grief. I have with me Crystal Neal, and she has had the terrible and very horrible experience of losing her daughter to suicide in December of 2021. So she's very new in her grief journey. And so we're going to talk with a little bit with her about that. I want to just quickly remind you that if you enjoy this content or you find it to be helpful or you would see it to be helpful for someone else, to please like, share, and subscribe. Also, if you need any more information about what I have in terms of resources on grief recovery, my website is www.juliannewilliams.com, which will be linked below. All right, so again, we have Crystal Neal with us today. And Crystal, again, thank you for sharing. Like we've talked about, you're really new in this grief journey that you could have never expected. And, you know, losing a child is one of those things that we have so many people who have gone through recently, whether it be through COVID or through all of the terrible mass shootings in the United States. And you lost your daughter by suicide. She was just barely 18. You want to talk to us a little bit about her story and what you all have been going through as a family?
Yeah, thanks, Julianne, for having me be a part of this, and thank you for actually doing this. I must say that it's podcasts like these that have gotten me to where I am today. So my daughter Taylor was a borderline personality disorder. She she started struggling with her mental health. I probably noticed around 10 or 11. And so we had her in and out of therapy from the time she was 10 or 11. And it was quite the battle. So I will forever say that she is a victim of suicide, a victim of her brain turning against her, and a system that was incapable of helping her. Many people that have lost a loved one to suicide know exactly what I'm saying when I say the system is incapable of helping, because mental health in America sucks, and mental health in Indiana is just horrible. Our journey with Taylor, for one, her first quote-unquote suicide attempt, she, I guess, technically was successful. You know, there were many times that, as a borderline, you know, if you're not familiar with borderlines, they feel everything you and I feel 1,000 times more, 100 times more a day. So she just felt so much and was exhausted. So there would be times that she would take 8 or 9 ibuprofen and then come to me freaking out because she took too much. And she was scared because she didn't want to die. And so we would call the poison control, and poison control said, well, that's not enough to do any damage. Any real damage could have long-term effects. Just keep an eye on her. What they would say is monitor and watch for certain side effects. If she gets sick, take her to the hospital, you know, or maybe induce vomiting. Wasn't even enough to have her hospitalized. So we would call her, we'd have an immediate emergency session with her therapist, and, you know, have to bump up her therapy sessions. But, you know, she was never actually hospitalized because, again, mental health sucks in this country. Her therapist suspected she was a borderline, and they don't like to diagnose borderlines until they're 18 because their personality is still developing. I personally would debate that because my husband and I had no idea what we were dealing with. We probably could have parented her a lot better if we would have had somewhat of an idea what we were dealing with. Because her therapist had a full psych eval done when she was 16, and that's when borderline personality disorder was first brought to my attention. I've got a bachelor's in psychology, and I really don't even recall even studying borderline. I'm sure we briefly touched on it, but we didn't really put a lot of focus on it. So when I saw that, I dove into it. Do what I naturally do. I obsessed about it and learned anything and everything I could. And, that's when we found out that that she wasn't diagnosed as a borderline, that she exhibited signs of borderline personality. She wasn't fully diagnosed until she was 18. And so it was then that we learned, how to better parent her, that we had to have very strong boundaries. And, every child needs boundaries, but borderlines need harder boundaries. And it was then that we learned a lot of parenting mistakes, that might not have been mistakes with our other children, but were definitely mistakes with Taylor because she was a borderline. Looking back, some of the things, that I very clearly recognize, and I guess I should probably say, as things were starting to get bad with her, her therapist had recommended we sent her to the Hoosier Youth Challenge Academy. It's called HICA for short. It's a academy that the National Guard runs, and most people in Indiana send their kids there because they're at-risk children. Like high school dropouts, drug addicts. Taylor was none of those. We sent her there because it was for her mental therapy. Borderlines need a completely controlled environment. You show me a parent that can completely control their environment, and I mean, kudos to you. The military can control an environment. That's about the only place you can send somebody that's a completely controlled environment, which is why we sent her there. That was, until now, one of the hardest things we ever had to do, sending our baby away. And this was in a COVID world. She was supposed to go for, I think it was supposed to be 5 months, but hers was 4 months because we sent her in August of 2020. She was supposed to go in July, so it was cut a little bit short, and we got her out in December. And it looked a little different because, of course, it was COVID. But we sent her there, and she did really well. When she was there, it was probably, when she came home, it was probably the healthiest that we have ever seen her. She came back a different person. She came back stronger mentally. She came back disciplined. We felt really good about things. Of course, while she was there, my husband and I went to therapy twice, every week, to make sure that when she came home to the healthiest environment that she could possibly come home to. We didn't want relapses. And so when she came home, we felt we were fully prepared. And she came home to a good environment. She came home, we homeschool our kids. So she was excited to do track. She was pretty much done with school because she completed her task while she was, at the academy. But she wanted to get her high school diploma, so she had a few classes to finish up. So she would have the diploma and the task. And so she did track. And so she graduated, from homeschool as well. And that was a good period. But in that time, she got in a toxic relationship online, which is a classic, borderline. She was in a healthy relationship before that. But in her in her mind. Healthy relationships never felt right. Everything's just speculation, but to me, I think it always just felt like to her, either she didn't deserve it or at some point it was going to end. So she typically would end the healthy relationships on her own, which is what she did. And then she got in the toxic one that was online with some guy from Guyana. At this point, she was 18. She had a job. By all standards, it looked like she was doing pretty well. But then you could kind of start to see her regressing. And with an 18-year-old, it's a lot harder to control certain things. She was saving to move out. She was talking about college. It was one of those things you could see she was in a relationship that wasn't good for her. But she'd been through her therapy. She still seemed to be doing okay. We did have her see her therapist again. And we saw her therapist as well. And I guess, kind of fast forward to, the day that she passed away, was December 22nd. I just had a Christmas party at work. She took my oldest daughter, she took my middle child. Taylor was my oldest, and our neighbor, to my Christmas party. And she did some work for my husband. She came home and threw a fit because my youngest daughter ate all of the cake pops that she had brought. She was working at Starbucks. I guess I vividly remember that, and so does my youngest daughter and my youngest daughter's friend, because they heard Taylor being very angry about the cake pops. They thought Taylor was going to beat them up, which Taylor never beat anybody up. They knew Taylor was mad. And so the morning that she passed, I was heading to work. I was the last person to see her alive. I was the only person that saw her that day. I saw she was coming out of the bathroom. I was coming out of my bedroom. Our bedrooms were right across the hall. And I saw her. She stood tall. I still remember this so vividly. She looked right at me, smiled, looked strong. She looked healthy. And I said, you have to work today? And she smiled and said, yeah. And I said, I hope you have an awesome day. I love you. And she said she loved me too. She went in her room. Went downstairs, was getting ready to leave. I heard a little commotion upstairs. Well, I heard some commotion, and I thought it might be Nicole and Audrey. So I checked downstairs. Once I confirmed it wasn't them, I was going to head upstairs to check on Taylor, but I had a profound feeling that just kind of made me feel like I should go on to work. I had to take the dog to doggy daycare. So I took the dog and went about going to work. Felt no fear, no anxiety. And to me, I don't know why, that's just very profound. Because there's been a lot of times where I've had feelings, and I didn't that day. Worked that day. And we know now that probably 30 to 40 minutes after I left that morning is when Taylor passed away. She was on the phone with that toxic boyfriend. Was on the phone with her when she took her life. He knew she was doing it. She had sent him pictures. And he did nothing. He said that he was going to get a hold of her parents. He said as soon as her phone died, he was going to call, and he did nothing. That's sad, because if he lived here local in the States, we'd have more than enough to prosecute him, is what I've been told, but, he lives in a different country. And unfortunately, because I was at work, my middle child is the one that found her. And so I guess fast forward to today, I guess where we're at, that was just a really rough time because it was right around Christmas. My my daughter, finding my other daughter was really hard. My youngest daughter was 10 at the time. She's 11 now. My middle child is 15. She'll be 16 this month. Taylor would have been 19 this month. And, my husband was at work when it happened too. So, now we're all trying to navigate and figure out life without Taylor, because that's not how it's supposed to happen. Parents should not have to bury their children. And I guess kind of thinking about things, like even now, like my youngest child says some of her difficulties is talking about, how Taylor passed. Because, I don't mind. I know some people don't talk about this, but Taylor hung herself. I don't know if I should share this on this, but my youngest child said she didn't even know that was how people died. These days she thought that was how people were sentenced to death back in the 1800s. And so I think it's sad because, a healthy Taylor, I don't think she wanted to die. I know Taylor said over and over, she just wanted her pain to stop. She wanted her pain to end. And I always remember, when she would have breakdowns and episodes where she'd just be screaming and crying because she just was overwhelmed with anxiety or depression, and she'd just be shaking and nobody could console her. She just had to scream and get everything out, and she'd just say, I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask to feel all of this. I just want to feel nothing. She'd say that over and over again. I just want to feel nothing. I think about how I feel now, how the range of emotions, they talk about the stages of grief, the anger, the sadness, even the moments of anxiety, and that gives me just a glimpse of what poor Taylor had to go through every single day. And so some of the things that I guess I like to share and I really want to put out there is the stigmas around, mental health, things that really kind of make me angry, is, the way people look at mental health. And a big eye-opener, to me, was, when you think our brains control everything in our body, and we only use about 10% of our brain, and all of the studies and the research, the smartest people in the world don't even have a glimpse of what our brain does or how to fix things or what it's capable of. But the one thing that we do know is if my arm is hurt or broken, my brain sends a signal and says, your arm's hurt, go get help. Same with any part of your body. Or for Taylor or anybody that's a victim of suicide, their brain is broken. So when their brain is having that episode, like for Taylor, when she was 19, her brain not fully developed. When she was in that moment of whatever she was feeling, what's going to send a signal for her to go get help? Because that's what sends the signal to go get help. When your brain is suffering and messed up, how do you know to get help? Especially when your brain isn't fully developed. So I think people should understand that and should know that, because, so many people get angry with victims of suicide thinking that it's selfish, and Taylor wasn't selfish. most often Taylor was trying to help everybody else instead of herself. But I think a lot of times that's ultimately what destroyed her. They have very broken brains, and nobody knows how to help them or even where to start. So
I want to piggyback on that, though, because I think what you're saying is a couple of things that are really important in a conversation that you and I had. And number one, mental health care in our country is not well developed. We talked about how our families, we're truly both victims of a mental health system that doesn't address really what's going on, or doesn't have, and part of it is it's very hard. The brain is so complex, as you mentioned, but it's very hard to get treatment. It's even hard to get a counseling appointment. It's hard to get into a psychiatrist, right? So we have all these things because we have not placed any as much emphasis or importance on mental health care because it's a stigma. People are afraid to have mental health problems because of the way other people may treat them. And so we've talked a little bit about that. The other thing, really that, as you go through it is when you are the person who is left, and just for anyone who hasn't listened to my podcasts or looked at any of my YouTube videos, I lost my husband to suicide. And, he was quite young. He was 38, not as young as Taylor, but still very young, had a whole life ahead of him and a beautiful life right in front in him, or in the present moment. But, it's very easy for people to blame the family, the parent, the wife, the whoever it is. And so because of the stigma around mental health and people have a lack of understanding, there's always somebody that's to blame. And, we talked about how, and for anyone who has experienced a suicide and you're wondering, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. There was nothing you could have done different. And, but here we are, on the earth, living with the decision that someone made to end their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And, my daughters and I are seeing a wonderful therapist who specializes in trauma. And she said something to me that was very eye-opening, that I definitely would like to share. Because even though I look at mental health differently going through this walk, she had pointed out to me, that we still just don't see mental health the way that we need to, because we will look at little kids and say, you're a child. What do you have to, be upset about or be depressed about? And how can we say that to them? Because we don't know what's going on in their head. We don't know what chemicals are imbalanced. We don't know what they're feeling. But nobody would look at a cancer patient and say, oh, get up out of that bed. It's all in your head. Mm-hmm. Like, what do you have to be sick about? Or a diabetic person, like, that sugar imbalance or your inability to make insulin, that's all in your head. Nobody does that with any other health condition, but we always do it with mental health. Why? Why? Because we know that there are imbalances in the brain, and we know that there are distinct issues, that it's not just a thought. People cannot control some of these thoughts, these feelings, but yet we still look at it in a manner like it's their fault, and it's not their fault. They're not seeking attention. They're not manipulating, and there's 1,000 other demeaning words that have been said to people that are suffering with mental aliases, that should not be said, because it is a disease or an issue like anything else that doctors treat patients for. So
you reminded me of something, in my younger years, being married, and my husband, he struggled with depression most of his life. He did not tell a lot of people, because he was, he felt very private about it, and he didn't want to be judged. He thought that, people would disrespect him and whatnot. However, at times in our marriage, when we have, for us, a beautiful home, 2 beautiful children, we both have good jobs. I remember my frustration sometimes, and you talked about feeling like you could have been a better parent. And I think that you were probably and are a really good parent. So I know you loved her through every minute of it. I think back of the things that sometimes I would say, like, what more do you want? You've got a beautiful home, 2 beautiful children, just a life that people would give their right arm for, and yet you're still complaining, you're not happy, it's not good enough. And so I think we then take on a lot of things later on as we look back on interactions and say, well, should I have said this? Should I have not done this? Should I have? And, it's tough on those shoulda, woulda, couldas. But, you and I talked about it. My husband, I had already, caught him trying to take his life twice, and had been hospitalized a couple of times and checked out against medical advice. I told the clinicians that he was going to take his life, and they laughed essentially in my face. In your case, and so it was predictable. I just couldn't stop it. In your case, you really had no signs that Taylor would go to the extreme of ending her life. And so, I think there's a couple of differences here, and I don't know if it might be comforting for people to know that sometimes we just don't know.
Yeah, no, and that's what I've said. Before Taylor went to HICA, she talked about suicide a lot. A lot. She would reach out to friends. We would hear it out of her mouth all the time. And I felt a lot of times people that do that, it's a cry for help. Mm-hmm. And I think anytime you hear people that constantly talk about it, they're suffering. And maybe there are people out there that do joke about it and attention, are doing it for attention, and shame on those people that do that. The majority of people, I think it's a cry for help. And even if they are saying they're doing it for joking, I still think it's a cry for help. Because most people that aren't suffering with something aren't going to joke about stuff like that. I would never joke about something like that. Even now, with everything that I'm dealing with, I would never joke about something like that. After Taylor came home from the academy, we never heard her mention suicide once. It was a thing in the past. That's why we felt she was healthy. We felt she was mentally strong. She never once threatened, never mentioned it, never reached out for a lifeline. It was never discussed. She was just gone. And I've heard a lot of times people say, a lot of times the victims of suicide, they just do it. And I know that that's not always the case, but that was definitely the case, with Taylor. So, the one thing that I've heard from people that are survivors of somebody that they've lost from suicide is nobody's immune. It happens everywhere. And you talk about the blame. Initially, my husband didn't even want to ever talk about what happened to our daughter, because that's the first thing people do. What did those parents do? Well, they had to do something. Mm-hmm. It's the fear of, people are going to blame us. we didn't often talk about Taylor's diagnosis because there's this assumption that borderlines are borderlines because of, childhood abuse. And Taylor, as far as we know, had no childhood abuse. I mean, she never went to daycare or anything like that. So those fears and those stigmas. I think I'm a little more passionate now about, Taylor was always talking about her mental health, always sharing her stories. She was very passionate about helping borderlines, and I'm very passionate to help other people, survivors, people struggling with mental health, because if I can prevent somebody from going through what we're going through, that's what my daughter would want. I have strong faith. Definitely feel my faith is being challenged right now. But in my small group of my Bible studies, I've said this before, that sometimes I wonder if my greatest sin is my silence. Not that I don't have other sins and I don't make mistakes, but, now I just keep thinking back, my silence. Why was I so freaking silent? And I'm not going to be silent anymore. Sometimes I wonder if I just bring it up too much and talk about it too much, but I don't care. I want to change the stigma. We're not perfect by any stretch of the means. We make mistakes, and when Taylor was struggling, some of my lowest before we sent her to HICA, my pastor, I was broken because I just didn't know what to do. And I remember my small group, everybody laid hands on me and prayed. It was a very defining, powerful moment. I had hope at that point. And my pastor had looked at me and said, there is no one way to be a perfect parent, but there are a million ways to be a great parent. And he told me I was a great parent. Mm-hmm. I fully acknowledge I'm not a perfect person or perfect parent, but I tried every day to be the best person and parent that I could, kind of like you. I definitely had those moments, that I wanted Taylor to look on the bright side of things and see everything that she had, because she had a beautiful life. She didn't need anything. We all want other things, but she had everything she needed and then some. But again, it's that mental health, I didn't know how she felt. I was never in her body. I've had my moments where I said the wrong things, and I'm learning from those mistakes. So, yeah.
Well, but, and again, I want to encourage you and remind you that, whatever mistakes we made in those relationships, whether it be me as a wife, you as a mom, we weren't in their bodies. We did not know what they were going through. And there's probably nothing, it wouldn't have mattered what we said, because none of us are perfect. I think some of it is when we see someone that we're hurting, that we love is hurting like that. We're just trying to say, look, you're hurting, but, wow, you're so blessed. And that's just, I think, how I think it's how we're wired. I think it's how, as humans, I also think it's sort of socialized. But, the other, thing I want to talk about for a minute is, the whole, what do you tell people? Because you just mentioned it, that, your husband was very reluctant to be honest. And I shared with you that, the police came to my house at 1:13 a.m. and I had until my kids woke up in the morning. And, it was a hard decision. I decided that I wanted to be truthful for a couple of reasons. Number one, because I live in a small town where people are in your business a little bit, and it's not always out of love. And then also, they need to know because they're related to him, in terms of their own physical, mental health. But that I just didn't want them to find out, on the playground. And then also I knew that there was work to be done to honor his life. But interestingly, and this is why I think the stigma part is so important, when you decide to be open about things, you open yourself up to things maybe that are unintended. So I found out, just recently, I would say in the last couple of years, and talking more to my daughter about it, that there were children on the playground or that would see her later that would actually say just awful things to her. There was a group of boys, and one of them actually came and apologized to her and to me. There are 3 out there who have never done that. And they actually would say things like, of course your dad killed himself, and what's it like to have your dad shoot himself. And she had some really awful things said to her. And so we take such a big risk because of the stigma. It does end up hurting my daughter a lot. I mean, she's very strong and she's a beautiful soul, and she is just, I'm so proud of her and the life that she is creating on her own. But she has gone through a lot of pain just with the situation, but then by other people using mental health outcome to judge. And, I don't know how, I understand where your husband was coming from. I don't know where he sits right now on it, or, how, if you guys have had any ramifications like that at this point. But I know for us as a family, I had somebody come up to me the day he died and said, you should have never left him alone. I just don't understand people's judgment. So have you guys had any of those things happen where we can let people know who hear this that, sometimes that maybe it's well-meaning, I don't know, but people are very cruel about the stigma.
Yeah. People say some stupid SHIT. So, first and foremost, if there's one thing I would like to enlighten people about, is don't ask how somebody died. I think that is the rudest question to ask. And I will be the first to admit, we're all naturally curious. I mean, by human nature, we're curious. And I have always hated that question. Even before I lost my daughter, we had a friend that had lost a child. And the moment that child passed, the instant moment, people are all, how'd they die? How'd they die? How would they know if the child died of something natural? How would they know? Like, there's no death certificate. Why are you asking? That is so rude. I hate that question. And so let people share their story. Don't ask. I mean, and I had gotten to the point where I'm like, if people are going to come up and ask, I'm going to ask what your penis size is, or I'm going to ask a lady what her weight is. I'm going to think of the rudest question.
The most inappropriate thing that you could say. Yeah.
Because you shouldn't ask. And so until my husband was ready to start talking about it, I just told, my kids, say Bigfoot. It was a Bigfoot attack, and when people look at you, say, ask a stupid question, you're going to get a stupid answer. Mm-hmm. But we don't mind sharing now. I will say, for my 11-year-old, she doesn't want to share. An adult ask her. Why would an adult ask an 11-year-old child how her sister died? That just infuriates me. So, I could really yell about that subject for hours, but
so tell me, what are the things, because in a very short period of time, you guys have, first of all, you've just been through so much, and if you were going to share with a parent at this point, what are some of the things this last, 6-ish months that you've been living without your daughter and living your grief journey? What are some of the things that have helped you at this point early on?
The podcasts. So everybody handles grief different. I obsess about things like my brain. I just have to understand. And so I never invaded my children's privacy. I think your journals and things like that are everybody's entitled to their private life to an extent. You have to keep your kids safe, but my daughter was 18, so after she passed, I wanted to understand things, so I looked into a lot. But aside from that, I listened to podcasts. I listened to your podcast. I read Megan Devine's book. And I also found this podcast, Totally Got Out of Bed. It was parents that lost their kids to suicide. And yeah, I probably read 3 or 4, 5. I don't know. I just read and listened to lots of things. And you're not sleeping, not regularly. So, and when you wake up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, you can't get up and work out because then you're going to be even more awake. So you read to try to get to sleep, and so that really helped a lot. Therapy, a good therapist, and somebody had recommended to us, because suicide's a traumatic thing. So we saw somebody that specializes in trauma. She does EMDR therapy because my 15-year-old found her. They suggested EMDR therapy would be great for helping her learning how to deal with it, and it has been. So we've got success stories with that. For me, talking about it, I like to look at pictures. I like to watch videos, but that's me. My husband, he was in the military. I will also say he was abused as a child, growing up. His mom was 17 when she had him, and he did not have an ideal childhood at all. She was verbally, physically abusive. So he has a lot of past trauma. And then this just opened up a lot of scabs and wounds, that he tried to heal from. So for him, he sees pictures and he breaks down. Videos makes him break down. His heart is hurting really bad. But going through something like this, I tell everybody, in some sense, we all died the same day Taylor did. We will never be the same people we were before. We see the world through different eyes. Him and I, especially as parents, just look at everything through a different lens. I think, my 2 daughters, look at things different as well. So the world has less color. And I hear in time, that we do, our capacity to allow joy in grows. And I can kind of see that. But I think on some level, I will always have that filter. So, I just always there will always be a fear there with me. I don't think any amount of therapy will ever take away some of the fears that I will walk the rest of this earth with. So, but those are things that help. I need to work out and exercise. I know that would help. And one of the things that Tony Plant, she lost a child to suicide, that she always said she knew for her that she had self-care things that she had to do every single day, or she would relapse. And so I try to focus on certain things that are good for me, so I don't get sucked into that black hole. I try to eat right. I may not shower every day, but I try. I try to do the normal self-care stuff. And anybody that's been in deep grief knows that I totally didn't shower. It might sound gross, but...
No, totally normal. Totally normal.
That's what I hear. And I've heard some people that don't go through deep grief, that they talk about that they don't shower every day because they're just,
So now you have a little more compassion.
yeah. So But yeah, eat healthy. I try to, cry. I never dealt with my feelings before losing my daughter. I tried to run past them. I didn't like feeling sadness. I liked the movie Inside Out. That visual really sunk in with me. I never let sadness take control. Like I felt joy was almost always in control in my little headspace. And so now I let sadness lead every time she needs to. So anytime somebody asks, I talk about things. Like I don't just go up to people at the supermarket and share. Yeah. And I don't share with anybody that asks. I know there are people that are not deserving to know my story. Sometimes that's probably difficult for some people to know who is safe and who is not safe. But for the most part, I do know. So that helps. I still have the worries. My kids are small, 15 and 11. And even though we're doing the right things, I'm pretty certain they're not dealing, they don't have the mental capacity to deal with it the way that I am.
Yeah, and as our brain, as we grow and our brain grows and all of it develops, I've noticed, with my children, I encourage them whenever they need it to get therapy because we've made sure that was part of our healing journey. But even me, we come through periods of time where there's just something else that comes out, and so it that's the thing is it doesn't end. We become more able to cope with the reality. We find ways our emotions soften, but you're correct that I love what you said in terms of maybe what people can think about is a part, you died the day that Taylor died. You're never the same person. And so we can't expect that there's no timeline, and whatever that is, even for me, 17 years later, I'm not the same person. I will tell you that at this point, I don't want to have been the same person because it's, grown my faith and other things. But I think that's a very profound way of putting it. And so you're right. There's never going to be a time where things are normal.
Yeah. And that just kind of made me think, you were talking, because we are still very new. Anybody that has lost somebody significant can definitely attest to this. In the beginning, it is so overwhelming, the amount of support that you get. Like the first 2 to 4 weeks, everybody wants to reach out to you, and you just don't know how to deal with it. Everybody, it's like trying to drink water from a fire hose. It's so much, and then boom, it's gone. Like you had too much support and then nothing. Right. It's like a desert. And to some extent, you definitely need some time to just be a family and process. And we are very fortunate, at least I am very fortunate. I have some very good people in my life, like the Fosters and the Alvies. I will definitely mention them because they are my angels. And there are other people that you just get random messages, or some people that just hear about it and didn't know. And those are kind of like kisses from God or touched by an angel, because you have no support, like everything's gone. And so you're kind of in that moment of weakness, and then somebody reaches out like, oh my gosh, I just heard, or how are you doing today? And so I think anybody out there listening that's wanting to help or support people, set alerts on your phone, or whenever you think of your friend or loved one, send them a message. I don't care if it's 2 a.m., 3 a.m., send it, because they need it. That's a thought from God. act on it. My Nana always told me, don't ignore those messages, because people that are grieving, there comes a period where nobody is reaching out to them, and they desperately need those little uplifts. So that's helped a lot, getting random messages and random cards. I have a client that sends me a card about every 2 weeks.
Aww.
And I love it. It just makes me smile. That's kind of nice. And Mother's Day was a first, and I did not expect to get as emotional as I did. But it started because, I got blown up with text messages from kids that I coach, friends, family, extended friends, everybody wishing me a happy Mother's Day, everybody reaching out, telling me that they were thinking of me, which meant a lot, but then kind of set me in an overwhelming emotional state, because I was like, that's the other thing is, just the hormonal waves and surges of emotions you have no control over.
No, and it is, that's why I titled my book Head Above Water, because, those waves they come and go, and all you're just like, please just let me breathe through this, and don't let me drown today in whatever it is that I'm feeling. But I love your point too, that, one thing that we can do when we're helping others who are grieving is to not forget about them later. And it doesn't have to be, all the time, but I had a group of friends who were very kind and kept up with me for quite a long time, just checking on me. And, you need the distraction when you're in the middle of the grief, the beginning of the grief journey, but then it doesn't end. And so those people, they're like angels sent to you, and it just means a lot.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, it means a lot. And other people that are trying to support, when you're hurting, there is nothing you can say. Mm-hmm. Stop trying to think of the perfect thing. Stop trying to think of the right thing, because nothing is right. Mm-hmm. Nothing is perfect. Mm-hmm. As I can tell you, when I lost Taylor, the things that I appreciated most were the people that were just there, the people that just came and tried to make me feel normal, that let me be who I wanted to be, that let me talk, that listened. The best thing that you can do is just be there. I guess it's kind of hard to say, because some people might want to go out in public and want people to ask them about their loved one. And I just remember our first outing after Taylor died. We wanted to go out, and we didn't want anybody to ask about her. We didn't want anybody to talk about her. We wanted to go out and be normal and feel normal. Mm-hmm. And of course, people wanted to ask, and you're just like, oh God, just let us be normal. Yeah. And that was us. Not everybody is that way, but I can just say the best thing you can do is just try to, hey, act like a normal person mm-hmm. around them. Good to see you. Can I give you a hug? Or, don't give opinions. I know you had asked me, I hate that your daughter would hear things like that. And I cringe, because opinions are like buttholes. Everybody has them. And a lot of the opinions stink just like a butthole. We love giving our opinions, but when it comes to grief and sadness, we should probably just keep our opinions to ourselves, unless somebody specifically asks what their opinion is. I will use, my husband, somebody told my husband that our daughter was not going to go to heaven because suicides don't go to heaven. So I'm sorry, I guess God, he has a one-way, ticket, him and God are on the phone talking about this stuff. nobody knows. I mean, it doesn't specifically say in Scripture. And if it's a sin, Scripture specifically says that all sins are equal, except for sin against the Holy Spirit. And I have not read in the Bible, I've read the Bible more than once, that it says suicides are a sin against the Holy Spirit. So God knows the heart. And my daughter was saved and baptized. She knew Jesus. And from what I know of the Bible, the one way, the bridge that gets us to heaven is believing Jesus is our Savior. And my daughter, believed that. So, why somebody would tell my husband that my daughter's in hell because she took her life, shame on them.
Yeah, I got that too. And you know what I told them? I'm sorry, that's not the God I serve.
Exactly.
The God,
turns people away from God.
That's not the God. The God we serve is exactly everything that you talked about. He's a good God. He created Taylor. He created Alan. He created everyone else who has taken their life. He already knew it was going to happen. And, just our imperfect love for our children, we don't hate or not forgive our children. God has the perfect love. And so I can't imagine that his perfect love does not overcome someone choosing to go home with him.
Yeah, I agree. So,
but those are the crazy things, and that's why, being open about mental health is really hard. And I think people avoid it. And I also believe that families in the past have felt that if they had mental illness in their family, that there was something inherently wrong with what was going on within their, either their family dynamic or their gene pool or whatever. And like you said, this knows no bounds. They're just, you don't choose it. It is just as you don't choose to get cancer or diabetes or anything else. We don't choose to become mentally ill. And unfortunately, because people don't understand mental health, they look at it as something that it's not. Yeah, and that is true. When you don't understand something, you want to label it, you want to make it something ugly, you want to write it off, and that just shouldn't be the case.
No. So.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have a picture of Taylor?
Oh, I do have lots of pictures. What would be the easiest way?
I mean, can you just show one on the screen, or you can either share your screen, or do you just have one you can hold up?
Yeah.
I know. I know I put you on the spot, but I think what's important for everybody to see is her beautiful face, and just because she's not here in this realm with us doesn't mean that she's not with us, and it also doesn't mean that she wasn't here. And it personalizes it for people when they see. Oh,
yeah. Can you see that? Okay.
I can see it beautifully.
Taylor and Nicole. So, she was a dancer. Now that's her at Hicka. I'm trying to. There we go.
Yep.
The lighting.
Yep, beautiful and happy.
She was beautiful and happy. I've been working on her slideshow. This is actually one of my friends did a painting of this for me, and so that's Danielle and Taylor. She was very. And this is something I find very interesting. She was very artistic. And I find people that are very strong on their right brain are very artistic, do tend to have more mental, more depression, more anxiety. And I'm not sure why that is, but I don't know if there's ever been any studies on that. But I find a lot of people that are very skilled and strong in the arts, whether it be drawing, painting, musically inclined, dancers. And I don't know if you found that in any of your research.
I actually need to make myself a note because, I've been researching some other things on neuroscience, and that would be an interesting one to look at. So
I don't know what all they center their studies around. Side note, in a week and a half, I'm going to be a part of a study. I had read in the Mighty, Columbia University is studying survivors who have lost somebody to suicide. They're studying like the brain waves, and so I will be flying to New York to do an MRI as they have me look at pictures of my daughter and ask me questions. The research has to be done within 6 months of losing somebody, but I guess I like to see that places are trying to figure out how this works, what's going on, how do we get to the bottom of certain things. And as I was questioning the lead psychiatrist, like, what do you hope to find? And they know people that have lost somebody to suicide, that we're dealing with depression, amongst other things. And they're hoping that whatever they see on my MRI will help them uncover or learn more about depression. So we'll see. Mental health still really sucks, but it's definitely come a long way. Probably even in the 17 years since you lost your husband.
Mm-hmm. It has.
I know the lady that heads up our, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention here in Indiana, she lost her dad to suicide, I want to say 20 years ago. And she talks about just what a long way it's come and how bad it still is.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Just sad.
I know. Well, I think we are getting about an hour, and I want to actually hopefully talk with you again as you walk through your journey, because I learned so much from you, and I am humbled by your loss, and I'm so glad that we were able to be connected. So
same here.
I'm gonna come that way very soon. So I hope that we can meet in person. But I just, again, want to thank you for all of your honesty, the, advice that you've given, the, direction that you're going to help mental health become normalized, meaning just like we do any other illness. And I'm just grateful for you. So everyone, this is my friend Crystal Neal. Thank you for your time today. And we'll talk to you very soon. And again, everyone, I'll link it below, but you'll be able, if you need more resources on mental health care, please go to my website, www.juliannewilliams.com. Thank you.